I don't ever remember being mad at you. I remember being sad and really hurt. And never understanding how you could make that decision.
In the first 2 episodes of the podcast series, A Conversation with My Ex, Konnie and I talked openly about our marriage and about my affair. If you haven't heard those, it might be better to go back and listen to them first. And in the upcoming 3rd and final episode, we'll talk about the challenges that followed our divorce and how they shaped our relationship with our children. But before that, I want to offer something different. What Konnie and I experienced, we experienced as adults. Our children had no say in any of it. They simply lived inside the consequences of decisions we made. And each of them dealt with those consequences in their own way. We have 5 children. They were invited to contribute to this series if they wanted to. And in the next podcast episode, you'll hear more from some of them. But right now, 2 of them will share their memories of those first few years of family transition. You'll be hearing from our oldest son and our youngest daughter. Same family, same events, but unique experiences. Listen to what they had to say.
Welcome to The Recovery Room, a podcast presented by affairhealing.com.
In this healing place, in this healing place.
Hi, my name is Caleb Tedder. I am 41 years old. I was in 6th grade when I learned from my dad that he had had an affair. And it was during my middle school years that my parents attempted to work on their marriage, which eventually led to divorce. During those first few years, I would say that our family dynamics were very chaotic and mostly full of sadness and a lot of tears. We would have family meetings to update everybody on what was going on, what our parents were thinking. And I just remember those meetings were pretty miserable. I would basically put my head down and just hear from my parents what they were trying to do, what they were trying to process through. But there was just a lot of pain and hurt and tears and confusion. And so family time became really stressful in our home. And soon into it, my dad moved out and my parents were trying to work on their marriage while they were separated. But we essentially became a home where we'd go to our dad's every other weekend, and then we would live with my mom the rest of the time. It was hard because when my parents would see each other, there was always a chance that it would turn into an argument. They would have moments where they could be around each other, whether my dad was dropping us off or picking us up. Those were most often the times they would encounter each other. There were times where they could see each other and be okay and force a good conversation or a non-bad conversation. And you knew it was forced. You could tell they did not want to be around each other, is the feeling I had. They were just doing it to do the exchange, have the other person take the kids and move on. But there were also times during that exchange that it would turn pretty ugly. And something might be said and an argument would start. And there would be yelling leading into that conversation. And so I learned during that time that I just really preferred my parents to not see each other. Obviously, I wanted them to be together. That was my hope. But I pretty quickly learned that it didn't seem like things were getting better. And when they were together, there was a good chance it was going to be stressful and angry and yelling and a lot of tears. And I got really tired of that. And so I preferred that they didn't actually spend time together because it was easier for the family if they just didn't see each other.
Hi, I am the youngest of the 5 kids. When you and Mom divorced, I was 3 years old. So I don't have many memories before. I don't have many memories of you being married. I have a few memories after the divorce, which are very sad, hard, painful things, as they rightfully should be. You know, I'm a kid. I don't understand the process of what all these emotions are and why people are feeling them. As an adult, I can look back and be like, yeah, that all makes sense. I'm not like But there were a lot of emotions. When I was a young kid, there was a lot of emotions happening around me. I didn't really know what was going on. All I knew really was that my parents were divorced, and that was something that was not normal. Because in my field of friends and community, I don't remember, and I don't think there was anyone else that had any divorced parents. So I felt very like outcasted, or something was wrong, and I was really sad and really wished I had a dad at my house. He would open up the door coming home from work and give me a hug because it's dad coming home from work. That was like my idea of what a dad should be. But I like didn't really know what a dad should be because like I was so young. I never even had a dad in the house. But I always like envisioned as a very emotional child. I'm still an emotional human. But just this idea of a dad in the house was something I knew I was missing out on. I was really sad about that.
During the time in middle school when my parents were separated and attempting to work on their marriage, but really moving towards divorce, one of the big things that changed for me as a kid is I moved from someone who was just a willing participant in the family that got to move along with things. I didn't have to worry too much about what my parents were thinking because parents could fill in each other about it. They would do life together, and the kid didn't have to be updating the parents about what the other parent was doing. But now it changed where I became someone that informed the other parent about what was going on in the other parent. And this wasn't intentional. My parents weren't intentionally picking me for information about the other person, but I loved both parents and I believed they wanted to be together. And I do think at times they did. And so I wanted to help them understand what was going on in each other's lives. And I wanted them to hear what I thought was good news. And so I remember there were specific times where I became a liaison, probably by my own choice, but I would come to one parent and I would say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. And oh, here's what's going on in mom's life. Or I'd go to my mom and say, hey, here's what's going on in my life. Oh, and we were just with dad. And guess what he's doing? Guess what he's talking about? Guess what he's thinking? And I thought it was a really helpful thing. But then I pretty quickly learned that it was not helpful, because obviously there are a lot of emotions and conversations going on that I did not understand at all. And so when I'm sharing what I think is good news, my parents are hearing it as harmful news in their life. And I started to have this weird role where I would be informing them and I would watch my information cause them a lot of pain and hurt and anger and frustration, or even at times arguments back to me, not at me, but back about why my information was wrong or why I was thinking about it wrong and I needed to see it differently. That taught me to not want to talk to my parents about each other. That if I were to mention something about my dad to my mom or something about my mom to my dad, it brought pain and it brought a discomfort in the conversation. And so I learned to start observing and watching, but not sharing with each of them what I was feeling or thinking about the other. And so I started to internalize a lot of it rather than sharing with them. Thankfully, I had other people in my life that I could talk to about that helped me process it. But I remember that was a hard change in my relationship with them, was having to really learn how to guard what I shared about the other person. And sometimes as I got older, I had to learn how to defend the other parent because there's still hurt and there's still confusion about something that happened from the other parent. But I felt like at that point I got to a spot where I understood the situation a little bit better than the other parent because I was in it. So if I'm with my dad or if I'm with my mom, I'm observing what's going on, I'm understanding. And then if I heard the other parent say something about it and it wasn't correct to me, I learned to be able to defend the other parent, and not in a mean way, but just say, hey, actually, you know what? This is what I saw, or this is what I know of that parent, and I think this is actually what's going on. I think you may have heard something wrong or may not be aware of it. And both parents responded really well to that. They were really respectful once I started to try to assert my own voice in defending each other. And I think they both knew what was going on, whether they realized it at the time, but they honored and respected that. And I really appreciated that. And that allowed me to move into being an adult who was able to have an adult voice with my parents and not a kid voice who just had to submit to anything they were thinking or doing. But I was able to now have my own opinion on things and to actually, in my hope, bring healing to situations that might have hurt and confusion still. And I was grateful that my parents responded well to these things.
Mom never made you the villain. She would express hurt, she would express disappointment, and obviously like explain things that were hard, but she was never in a way that was like, and your dad is awful and terrible. It was never that. It always came from a place of just expressing what her experience was, as opposed to trying to get us to be mad at you. And I think that you always came at it too with just self-realization too of where you went wrong and what you've learned about yourself since then. I think having both of those is very helpful in understanding that you're human.
When I moved into high school after they got divorced, we had events that both parents wanted to be a part of. And at that time, in order for them to do so, I believe what they decided was that they would both come to public events, but they would just leave each other alone. Almost just give each other distance, act like the other person's not there just to make it through it. But then we get to experience having both our parents there, and they both get to see and be a part of the situation or whatever we're participating in. And I understand why they did that, and that's probably a very natural next step. But it still was really hard as a kid because you knew there was tension, and your most recent memory is that tension can turn into a really bad situation pretty fast. And so you do have this fear that when both parents are coming to an event that something bad could happen, that your parents could turn into an argument. Whether that's logical or not, there was that feeling that I hope my parents don't sit near each other. I hope someone doesn't talk to one of my parents that is on the other parent's side of the situation and it makes them feel bad or sets them off. You're just always nervous that something could happen. So as much as I loved my parents both being at events, it definitely brought attention. And I knew that they were basically just giving each other distance. And so that created confusion for me on which parent do I go and talk to when I'm done? Who do I go and spend time with afterwards? Before I go in, how do I say hi to both of them? It just creates some confusion as a kid, and it definitely created tension. But I understand it was probably a natural next step, and I appreciated that they both wanted to be there and were trying to figure it out. But thankfully, when I got into college, I think this is when we started to be able to move into more smaller settings as a family with both parents there. Birthday parties, eventually weddings, Christmas time would be times that both parents would want to be there, and it's a smaller setting. And both of them were able to start coming to those things. And again, giving each other distance, it would be a real formal, like, hi, nice to see you. How are you doing? Okay, great. And then there would almost be very little conversation the rest of the time. And then, okay, goodbye. Thanks for coming. But you just knew they were really giving each other distance in those spaces, but they were learning how to be there together so that we could have it. And the rest of us kids did get to experience having somewhat of a peaceful time together. There's always still tension that you feel because you know your parents are having a hard time being around each other. So going into those, you're still thinking, okay, are either of my parents okay with this? Do they feel awkward? Do they feel uncomfortable? You're aware of it and you're thinking about it the whole time, but you start to watch that they can be together. You notice that it works, and it starts to reinforce in you that, like, okay, this is possible. They can do this. I know it's not the perfect situation. I know both of them feel uncomfortable, but I also know this is a high priority for all of us. And this is a good case, a good scenario for them to be able to do this well. And so I really appreciated my parents wanting to do that and being willing to give each other grace during those times, to not poke at each other or to not bring something up, but that this was a time for family and not at all about digging into anything that they might still feel pain on.
Since I was the youngest, I don't have a lot of the memories of like what things might have been said during that time. What I mostly remember is by the time that I was older, you all obviously had worked through some stuff. I don't know how you both worked through it enough to get comfortable enough. I've never even like really talked about with either of you about how you came to such an understanding that you were able to come over for Christmas, which Christmas is like my favorite. When I talk about like my favorite childhood memories, I always talk about Christmas because You would come over on Christmas Eve. I'm pretty sure it was not you were on Christmas Eve, if my memory of that is wrong, but I know that you were there because you had to put stockings out. So I'm pretty sure you could come on Christmas Eve. I remember we'd all sleep in the living room. I think Mom slept upstairs. I remember all the kids, at least. All the kids would sleep in the living room with their sleeping bags. We'd watch A Christmas Story, and then we'd fall asleep. And I remember I would pretend I was asleep, but really I was awake, because you would wake up super early and you would put our stockings at the end of our sleeping bags. And then we'd wake up and we'd open our stockings and we were all together and we all had Christmas together. And I just Christmas was my favorite holiday. That was so fun. And also during the holidays, you guys, not that I even remember this much when I was older, past when you guys said this was starting to happen, when we were starting to get comfortable and you were able to come more. I don't remember ever there being any making someone to be a villain. There was no side eyes or comments that I remember. It was always just we're here to have a good time, and this is what the holidays are, and we are going to have a good time together. And I remember when you were two, my only thing on my Christmas list was, I just want a picture with my mom and dad. Because I was so young that I didn't have any pictures with you both together. Because you got divorced when I was 3, so I had no pictures of me with just you two. And that was my Christmas list. And you both took that picture with me. It was my favorite picture. I'm pretty sure I hung it on the fridge. I still have it. I was so happy to have a picture with my mom and my dad together.
And behind the scenes, us kids would start to work on helping figure out the family dynamics when we'd get together. So if we had a Christmas coming up or a birthday coming up, we would start to check with each other on, hey, which parent knows about it, which parent's been told, and which parent hasn't been told. And is this something we feel like we should make both parents aware and encourage the parents to do it together? Or is this something we feel like, no, this is more for this parent or this one's for this parent? And so we started to figure out how to navigate that together on our own and really make decisions on what we felt comfortable in those situations. And most often we were seeking to have both parents at the event. Sometimes that meant letting the other parent know that our mom or dad might not have been made aware of it or not invited, and that we would like them to be invited. Will that be okay with you? We would like for this to happen. And our parents were very gracious about that and saying, yes, of course, we would like them to be there. And there were still moments as we became adults where family drama happens. Dynamics happen between kids and parents and even just life. And as parents, they had to navigate how to help in those situations as parents that were no longer married and that had very different parenting styles or thoughts, but also loved their kids deeply. And so sometimes that would bring new tension. It would cause the time of being together to have more tension, or even cause it to be on hold for a little bit because they weren't comfortable being around each other. But at this point, we were old enough where we were pretty aware of these dynamics. And so it was understandable to know, okay, this is going on. So when we're together, so-and-so is not going to be there because of this. But we had seen that they had wanted to work on it and have a relationship as a family together like that. And so I always had hope that they would continue to work on those situations, which is what I've seen.
I think by the time I had talked to you honestly about the affair, it was after college. I don't think I've ever really talked to you honestly about it. I always just kind of hung out with you, but I lived with you for those few months. And I remember I remember where we were walking, and I really just fully asked you all the questions, and you were so honest. I mean, this was me after high school. So this was many years, and you'd done a lot of the processing and working on your own stuff, and very kind about Mom. You were very honest about your own struggles and working through things that you didn't know about yourself. And I think that was always really thankful to have that conversation and to have you own up to that you made those decisions and why. I think it was really good for me to understand why. You never talked poorly about Mom. And Mom has also never been one to be like, your dad is all at fault. I think there's obviously your dad is the one that made these decisions. And I think we all agree that you and me, everyone agrees that yeah, those weren't good decisions. I guess I'm just lucky. I'm lucky with the parents, with you and Mom, as I don't think everyone is fortunate enough to have a situation that we had.
Fade